everyone, and welcome to my channel MomStory by Sahana. Valentine's Day is right around the corner, and everyone is talking about Rose Day, Chocolate Day, this day, that day, etc. and etc. Everybody is offering something or the other for your special one to be gifted, right? So, here I am after a long break to welcome you all to this special Valentine's Day episode where we are unlocking the secrets to lasting relationships with Christopher Roberts, a renowned brand interventionist and author of 10 Reasons Why CX NPS Programs Fail. Chris has been instrumental in bringing about positive changes in corporate culture, bridging gaps between business leaders and their teams, and transforming workplaces into more positive and productive environments. But beyond the boardroom, how does his expertise in fostering collaboration, trust, and engagement translate into personal relationships? He is also an executive and life coach. Therefore, whether you're dating, married, or looking to strengthen any relationship in your life, this episode is packed with real life insights, timeless lessons, and practical wisdom to help you nurture deeper connections. So, Chris, welcome to my channel, Mom Story by Sahana.
Thank you, Sahana. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I've done many podcasts, but I can tell you, even before the podcast starts, that this is going to be the most fun podcast.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. So, Chris, since I know you and Linda from last 1.5 years, and I am not sure, but I think you're married for close to 40 years now.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And when you include our courting period, it's a bit longer. It's more like, 43 years that we've been together. So it is a
Oh
long
my
time.
God.
Yeah.
That's really wonderful. So, Chris, like we are here to discuss about relationships, especially the romantic relationships today. I would like to start with this. Recently, and in fact, from quite some time, every day we get to hear cases of divorces in the celebrity world and also among our friends and family. So,
Yeah.
the concept of this forever marriage or partnership in love, it looks like it's declining, and many people do not even like they're believing in it. They feel it's a myth, so they blame the generation as well. So, what do you think about this? And can you also spread some light on how you have been into this successful marriage? What's your secret sauce?
Absolutely. So I think what people don't realize is that marriage is like a life cycle, right? There are particular stages in a marriage, regardless of which marriage it is. Of course, some people get stuck on a stage, but I'll start with stage one, which is when you're actually courting someone, right? So you don't know too much about them. You find something about them that's kind of attractive. And at that stage, you're very curious, like who is this person? What do they do? What do they like? What don't they like? And so on and so forth. And then immediately after that phase, if that phase goes well, then the next phase is you end up in a situation where you fall in love, right? When I talk about falling in love, it's like it's a chemical reaction takes hold of you. And I have to tell you, when that actually happens, your brain leaves the building, right? And even if you fall in love with the wrong person and your best friends tell you, look, I don't think this is the right person, chances are you won't listen to them because you're totally blind, right? You're wearing rose-colored glasses. So that's stage two. Let's just say you proceed from stage two, then it becomes more like mature love. You get married, you move in together. When you actually move in together, it's a whole different ball game. When you're courting and you're dating, like when you go for the date, you're wearing your lucky socks, you put like nice perfume and all this kind of stuff before you go, and you're all set, you're on your best behavior, right? Once you start living together, suddenly you see this person that is like, and you think to yourself, did I really marry the same person? And I'll give you my own personal example.
Really?
I'll give you my own personal example. When Linda and me got married and we were living together, suddenly I noticed some strange traits. Like, for example, I keep my toothbrush in a particular spot next to my toothpaste, and she would shift it and put it in the drawer, right? We used to live in Melbourne in those days. It was very cold, right? And because it was very cold, we used to wear moccasins in the morning. And I used to keep them just if I got out of my bed, they were just there, right? So that I would get up and I would put my feet in it. Linda thought that was highly untidy. So she would take those moccasins and shove them underneath the bed because it looked untidy. And then in the middle of the night, if I had to go to the loo or whatever, I would get up and then and where are my moccasins? And it's very cold, and I had to go underneath the bed trying to find my moccasins, which used to drive me nuts. Then we only had one TV in those days. We were kind of very young, and I would be watching a program, and she would happily go and change the channel without asking. And I thought to myself, is this the same person I got married to? But then the other thing I noticed is, so she had come to Australia. The other thing I noticed was the typical male female communication conundrum where the female is upset about something and the male goes, "So what's wrong?" And the female goes, "Nothing." "So what's wrong?" "Nothing." "So what's wrong?" "Nothing." Now I realize that she had moved away from her family and she was actually very sad, but she didn't want to say that. But you go through these phases where there's a bit of like abrasion, I suppose, but not too much, because you're still in love with the person, and then you end into a mature love stage. Like you realize that this person has great character, has a beautiful heart, all that kind of jazz, and you go into a mature love stage. It's stable. There's a lot of love, all this kind of stuff. So then what happens is you end up in a situation where the kids come, right? And I have to tell you, kids are a bit of a distraction when it comes to romance, right? So they take up a lot of energy. They are like mini tornadoes, I find, in your life that disrupt everything. So everything disappears. The focus is on kids. You have a common thing to talk about, complain about, discuss about, and that takes up your time. And then you go through this mature love stage, you spend time with your family becomes this unit. Then the next stage is the kids go away, and now suddenly it's two of you again, right? So that takes a bit of adjustment, but it all depends now how you feel about your marriage, because at this stage, the marriage could kind of go into decline, where the passion drops, the romance drops. It's more like you respect one another, but you're just staying together, kind of like friends, yeah? And then later on, you hit the next stage where it's literally like a case of you go beyond friends and you literally become like, how do you put it, flatmates, right? And that's
Roommates.
when the marriage is really dead. So there's no passion, there's no love, there's potentially not even any respect, and it's just a natural life cycle, right? So the trick is, how do you keep a marriage going for that long? You must have heard about this term called the 7-year itch, right? It's like after 7 years, people get a bit itchy in a relationship. So my trick and the secret sauce is fundamentally this. You need to fall in love with the same person over and over again. Okay?
Wow.
So that means you start the whole life cycle again. So you get to the stage where, you might not go all the way to the end, but you might go in the middle and you go, okay, let's start the whole process again and fall in love again. Now, the trick is, how do you fall in love? So let me now take you back to my youth. When we wanted girls to fall in love with us, or at least be interested in us, what we used to do was we used to call it spinning, right?
Okay.
Spinning is when you go to a girl and you either crack a really funny joke in those days, or you find out what their interests are. So let's just say they're interested in animal cruelty, as an example. You'd make some profound statements around animal cruelty and how you're really keen into it. Now, why do you do that? Because you get the person to think about you. Once that person starts thinking about you, go, oh, that Chris, he said something very interesting. Then they think about you some more, and then next thing you know, it develops into an interest, right? And that's what we used to call spinning. And then you end up in a situation where this person gets interested in you and then hopefully falls in love with you, right? So now when you've been married with someone, you've been there, done that, you know them really, really well. How do you do it? It comes down to a fundamental truth, an attitude of gratitude. So be grateful for who they are, be grateful for what they do, and notice things that are positive about them. At the end of the day, where your focus goes, your energy flows. And it's really a case of, you can focus on someone being not good, or being or all the things that are bad about them, or you can focus on all the things that are good about them. Now, when you have an attitude of gratitude and you get up in the morning and you're truly grateful of that person, you start noticing the good things about them, and you fall in love again, and then you start the cycle off again. And personally, that's what I've done. So, for example, when my first child was born, I just looked at the miracle of birth because I was at the birth, and I looked at what Linda was going through in the process, and I fell in love again, right? And then after that, we had twins, and the twins came, and then I looked at how hard that was for her to work with them and look after them, and I fell in love again. But I'll tell you the funniest thing, right? A couple of months ago, Linda went to the US with her brother, right? And I was alone in the house with my two Frenchies. So I had to do a lot of the housework myself. And one of the things I had to do was I had to do the dishes. So one day I was in the sink and the sink was piled up, and I had to wash all the dishes, and my back ached from standing there. And as soon as my back ached, I thought to myself, oh my God, my wife has been doing this day in and day out for like, close to 40 years. And I fell in love again, right? And so once you think about something that's amazing about the person and you spin yourself as opposed to spinning someone else, you fall in love again and you go through that whole cycle. And that, my friend, is the absolute secret. Fall in love with the same person over and over again, because in this day and age, if you don't do that, there's a risk that you'll fall in love with someone else.
That's quite dangerous, I guess. So this is actually really very interesting that what you spoke about, like falling in love with the same person again and again. And the most important part that you spoke about was the gratitude, right? So Chris, like what you said, like we have a phase of life, like we fall in love and then we get into the matured phase, then we get into the, roommate phase. So in every phase of our life, the couples, they have certain needs, right? So certain core needs which each one of us have to fulfill. So
Hmm.
what do you think about, like how do we fulfill those core needs and what could be those core needs?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where I suppose my corporate experience and my coaching experience kind of meld together, right? So this is something I learned from basically Tony Robbins, right? The six core human needs. And the six core human needs are the following. A need for significance, and people who have a strong need for significance will be in leadership positions, they'll be politicians, they'll be movie stars, rock stars, etc., right? A need for connection. So professionally, these people tend to be teachers, nurses. They have a strong need for connection with other human beings and so on and so forth. Then you have the need for certainty. So these people want to be correct, right? They want to be precise. They want to be right. They want to be safe. They want to mitigate any risks.
Right.
And professionally, these people tend to be architects, engineers, and accountants, CFOs, people like that, right? Very analytical people. And then you've got the fourth lot, which is about variety. And these are people who want to do a range of things, kind of variety is a big thing for them. And they can't do one thing at a time, so they are the kinds of people that get bored very easily. Professionally, they tend to be, in the arts, the performing arts, and so on and so forth, right? So now you have these four core needs, right? And these are your basic kind of needs. And once you have these core needs and they are your basic needs, the next thing beyond that then is what I call kind of needs of the spirit. So this is, you can have these four needs and you can have everything, you can have a need for significance, you've got a good job, you've got lots of money, you have a need for certainty, you're safe, you're financially secure, you're healthy, you have a great relationship, and you have variety, you travel all over the world all the time. All these four needs are met, and that's wonderful, right? But you still feel something is missing. Then these two spiritual needs come into play. One is the need for contribution. So the need to contribute to something bigger than yourself, right? And the second one is a need for growth, personal growth. And some people mistake this. They think, this is about getting a degree or a certificate. It's not that. It's about who you become. Growth is like expanding yourself, becoming bigger, right? And these are the core needs. Now, I said this to you and gave professions as examples, but the fact of the matter is everyone in the world, regardless of, cultures, creeds, whatever, genders, they all have these six needs. But typically, two or three needs bubble up to the surface. So there'll be some people like executives have a strong need for significance and a strong need for, certainty, as an example, right? So few needs will bubble up to the surface. Now, here's the trick. The trick is this. Any activity that meets three or more needs becomes an addiction, okay? Positive or negative, okay? So let me give you an example of that. Supposing you're a member of an IPL team or a football team, correct? Okay. You meet your need for significance because you go, hey, look, I'm a supporter of Mumbai Indians or, whatever, right? You meet your need for connection because you're connecting with a tribe of similar people, right? You meet your need for variety because one day they could lose, one day they could win, right? So three needs are met. You don't meet your need for contribution or growth unless you're donating money to them. But generally speaking, you meet three needs, it becomes a positive addiction, right? The same thing with relationships. Now imagine if you're married to someone and they make you feel significant. There's a sense of certainty about them. They are not up and down emotionally. You know that you can count on them. You know in a crisis they'll be there. You know they're dead set, stable in that sense. Then they meet your need for certainty, right? They may meet your need for variety because they're different people. They make jokes. It's always enjoyable to be around them, and so on and so forth, right? So again, if three or more needs are met, then it's great. Now, need for growth. Supposing you all are both interested in growing in the same way, then you support one another. Like I always look at Linda as she's probably my coach, right? So you're both kind of growing together and supporting one another. So when you have a relationship where three or more needs are met, then it becomes an addiction. So the trick is to actually find out what someone's core needs are. And not just that, but how do they like to meet those needs, right? So so that's it. And if I can jump into the how do you meet them, a tool that I think is really good is the Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman. So it is an amazing book in terms of relationships. So what you have to think about is everyone has these different love languages. So it's very correlated to the needs, right? So the first one is words of affirmation. So people want you to say, hey, I love you, I think you're great, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So for some people, that's very important. Quality time is another one, like spend time with me, blah, 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 and the family. The third one is acts of service. Acts of service is where you do something for someone. So Linda, my wife, for her acts of service is the only currency. Okay. Words of affirmation mean nothing. You can say, I love you, this, that, whatever, it doesn't matter. But for her currency is acts of service. I will do stuff for you. I expect you to also do stuff for me. Do you get what I mean? Right. So acts of service is her currency. So rather than buying her gifts or telling her how beautiful she is, if you do something for her, that is what gives her a buzz. Physical touch is the next thing. So some people like to be hugged, some people like to be kissed, so that, they like to be held. It's the fourth one. And the last one is receiving gifts, so getting a gift. So for a lot of people, if they get a gift, means someone loves you. Yeah. So again, you need to understand what your partner's love language is. Okay. Now, I have fallen for the trap, trust me, many times because my love languages is gifts. I love receiving gifts and I like words of affirmation, right? So I have done both these and with Linda, and it's been like water for ducks back. I've bought her gifts and she just looks at me strangely. And then one week I go, where's that gift? She said, I returned it to the shop, right? So gifts do nothing for her. Words of affirmation do nothing for her. But if I help her in something, then suddenly it's like that she really appreciates. So understanding this, your love language is good. But the second part of the equation is being a translator, right? Knowing that even though your love language might not be to receive gifts, to empathize with someone else to say, oh, you know what? She bought me a gift. She bought it for me because she loves me, even though that's not your love language. So part of the success is not just, knowing what someone's love language is and doing something about it, part of it is being a translator, right? And being empathetic.
I
So
think most
hopefully
of
that's
the
helped.
couples miss on this,
Yes,
being the
yes.
translator. Yes, I
Yeah.
agree. Yes. So, well, Chris, I think it was quite interesting about this part, like what you explained about the mass hierarchy, which we widely use in the corporate, but that does not apply only to corporate. I think we can also use it for our personal relationships as well. And this five languages definitely, I think, are going to, help us. But Chris, there's something I want to ask you more about. It's like you said, like giving gift or receiving gift is somebody's love language, and somebody looks for act of service that makes them feel like, okay, I'm being loved, right? So my question to you is, what is the most important element in all these things?
Oh, look, there are probably two key elements. So, in addition to everything I've said to you, there are two key elements. Okay, the most important aspect, I tell you, is selection. And strangely, this is where it's common in the corporate world and in personal relationships, right? Because in corporate world as well, selection of a good candidate is absolutely, absolutely critical. Now, let me explain what I mean by selection. Remember how I talked about the life stages? So, in the initial stage, when you fall in love, the chemical reaction hits and your brain literally leaves the building, right? And you're not able to make a good assessment. So, I had been through a few relationships like this, which had ended badly. And the latest one that ended badly. So, just to explain, I used to live in Bandra in Mumbai. I used to live in Carter Road, and my friends used to live in Bandstand. So it was like a half an hour walk if you walk through it, right? Which is what I did that day. So I went and saw my friends and I told them about the relationship that had just ended. And because I was not in a good mood, I thought walking it off would be good. And on the way, I stopped at this church called St. Andrew's Church, which is facing the sea. And I sat in there and look, I'm not overly religious, but I just needed a serene place to have a conversation with myself. And I said, this is just not working. Like, I just need to find a way around this. This keeps happening over and over again. And I realized the issue was selection. So what I did was, in my mind, I made a list of criteria and I broke it down into mandatory criteria and nice to have criteria, right? So I literally listed it down in my head. I'll give you an example. The mandatory criteria was something like obviously this person had to have good character, had to have a good heart, had to have good this, good that, all that. That's a no-brainer, right? But there were other things, like this person had to love animals because, there were some girls who they'd see a dog and they'd get scared, or they'd see a cat and they'd run away. And that irritated me, right? So they had to love animals. That was a non-negotiable mandatory aspect, right? And then there were other nice to haves. Once I made my list, I went home and I wrote it down. Now, why is this really critical? Once you have this criteria in your head, before you fall in love and before the chemical reaction hits, you already have an assessment piece that says, I'm sorry, XYZ doesn't meet the criteria, right? So you can stop yourself in terms of getting into a bad kind of situation. Does it make sense? And then lo and
Right.
behold, after I made my list, there's they call the secret, it's like if you manifest something and you use your reticular activation system, you think about something, it shows up. And that's when Linda showed up. And she literally ticked off every box in the list. And hence I knew it was there. And she was actually a friend, before we got romantically involved, but she ticked all the boxes. And I knew that she was the right person. It was because I had a selection criteria. Uh, so that's one thing, selection. The second thing, and I haven't spoken about this yet, is about passion. So, what creates passion, right? And the answer is very simple. Passion is all about polarity. Let me explain. You've heard the term opposites attract. Okay.
Right.
Now, where does polarity comes from? It comes from masculine energy and feminine energy. And I should be really clear here. This has nothing to do with gender, right? You can be female and you can be masculine, right? And you can be male and you can be feminine, right? but it's the polarity between the two. So, what is the difference between them? So typically, if you have someone that is very masculine and someone who's very feminine, the attraction will be massive. But sometimes this can go out of sync, right? And I'll explain the situation. I had a friend of mine, they were in business, right? Husband and wife used to work in the business together.
Mhm.
And the business was not doing well. So my friend, the girl in this equation, who is actually very feminine, correct? Decided that because the business is not doing well, she had to take on more of a masculine role, right? So she became
Mhm.
more assertive, she became more demanding, she became more aggressive, she became more, direct, and so on and so forth, which was against her natural character of being feminine. So, like I said, polarity is what creates the attraction. As she became more masculine, he got emasculated and became less masculine. So he became less confident, less
Okay.
assertive. So suddenly they were on the same thing. No polarity, no passion, everything goes away, right? So the trick is, it's like you need to maintain that polarity. Let the masculine person have that masculine energy. Let the feminine person be that feminine person. So, in other words, be who you are. Because as soon as that polarity is lost, passion is lost, and the relationship is dead in the water, from a passion sense. You might respect one another, you might like them, but passion comes from polarity. That's where attractiveness comes from. So that is something that people don't really think about, but that is also extremely, extremely important.
Correct. So the balance is the key for any relationship that for that matter, right, Chris?
Exactly, exactly.
So, Chris, like we were talking about romantic relationships so far. So, but love doesn't, is seem to be limited to only romantic couples or only couples. It also extends to family and friends. So, and we also have a lot of clashes. Sometimes the damage is done. Like we
Yeah.
don't talk to someone for a long time, and in families also, like they fall apart, right? So I feel over a period of time, everybody changes. And how do we navigate these relationships? How do we tackle these? Because they are also as important as our spouses, right?
Yeah. So the fact is that there's a couple of things here. So first of all, I think when you have let's talk about families. If you have a family issue, you think you're the only one who's having the issue. And sometimes you tell someone else about it and they go, oh, even I have this issue. And then I think one of our colleagues, Kirtana, says, gar ki baat hai. So it means that every house, every family has some kind of issue, right? So first of all,
Correct.
try not to be too hard on yourself, thinking that you are the only one who has these big issues. Now, the fact of the matter is, with a family member, or for that matter, with a friend, there will be some disagreements, some clashes, and how do you get around it? And the a few principles that I'll share with you that can help repair this. Because the fact of the matter is that these things happen. I think Rumi said it best when he said, between what is said and not meant, and what is meant and not said, all relationship issues stem from this, right? So it's really a case of, once you know that, then the issue is, how do you fix it? So there's a few things. One is, we all change over time. We are all a function of a variety of things. We are a function of our upbringing. We are a function of our peer group. We are a function of our hormones. We are a function of our macrobiome. That makes a big difference in terms of how you feel and think. We are a function of our traumas. We are a function nowadays of even your past life trauma, right? So it's like all these things make up a human being. So it's like a soup, a mix of, everyone is like this soup, right? So there are always going to be some issues at some stage. And the second thing I would say is, like, allow people to have a bad day. People are allowed to have a bad day because they could just be having a bad day. The third principle I would say is evaluate it. Sometimes when something happens or someone loses it or treats you badly, it's very easy to assess that person based on that event. But if you think back to the ledger, right, they may have done 99 good things to you. This is the one bad thing. So once you evaluate the 99 versus the one, you go, hey, this is not so bad, in the scheme of things, that's not the real issue. But the tool I always share with people to repair relationships is the following, right? All relationships, there are three levels of a relationship. One is foundation. So let's just say you have a sibling or you have a parent or whatever. The foundation is that you know them for so many years, right? They've looked after you. You've played together, blah blah. That's your foundation, correct? The next thing is they may have done something to you, and the next level above that is intention. So the foundation might be rock solid, but the intention may be good or it may be bad. In some cases with siblings, the intention is also bad. The sibling is trying to hurt the other sibling, right? So the intention is bad, correct? So when the intention is bad, what do? You go back to the foundation, you go back to the thing, to the ledger, say, hey, look, this person may have done this one thing, but they've done 99 good things, right? So you look at the ledger, right? Now, sometimes the foundation can be good, the intention can also be good, but the execution can be bad, all right? And sometimes if the intention is bad, the execution will also be bad. But anyway, the execution is bad, right? So then you need to think about it and say, okay, the foundation is good, the execution is bad, but maybe the intention was good, you know? So like when someone came to me once and said, Chris, you desperately need to lose weight, as an example, right? Now, most people will get offended, but I go, they're actually trying to help me. Their intention is good. Execution may be bad, but the intention is good, right? So those are the three levels you need to look at. So in any situation, in any dispute or whatever, or disagreement, that's what you need to look at. Okay, what's the foundation? The foundation is strong. What's the intention? And the third thing is, what is the execution like? And sometimes executions can be bad, but intention and foundation can be good. Now, the obvious issue is you go, okay, something has happened, right? Let's just take you and me. Sahana said something to me, and I got really upset. Now, there's two ways I can handle this. So this I'd use in the corporate world as well. There's two ways I can handle it. I can go to Sahana and say, Sahana, what you did the other day was very stupid, and it really annoyed me, and you shouldn't have done that. Now, what is Sahana going to do in that situation? Sahana is going to get defensive, and she's going to, no, I wasn't stupid. You're the one that's stupid. You did something. That's why I did this. So, in other words, it's a fight. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you have to start with a fundamental premise, and it's a positive belief that people don't deliberately try to do the wrong thing. Correct? Because if you don't have this belief, the technique I'm going to tell you doesn't work. Okay. So what is the technique? Instead of going to someone and say, Sahana, you really upset me, your behavior was terrible, etc., etc. This is what you do. And, people should make a note of this. The dialogue that you need to follow is this. Sahana, the other day you did X, Y, Z. And I am sure it was not your intention. But I felt very hurt. And I felt like I lost confidence and I felt like I was not good enough. Again, I don't think that was your intention. Can you please clarify why you did what you did? Now, what do you think happens in that situation? Now, Sana is going to think, God, I didn't mean to hurt him, right? So Sana's immediate reaction is she's going to say, look, I'm sorry it came out that way, but my intention was this, or I didn't mean to do this, or I'm sorry I was having a really bad day, correct? But the language of the sentence is critical. Rather than going into full-blown attack mode, you share how you feel and you say, I know it was not your intention. But you have to start with an affirmation that says people don't deliberately do the wrong thing, right? And that is probably the best way to repair relationships.
Right. So the choice of words and the tonality both are very important when we're talking about this,
Correct,
right?
correct.
So one thing I like a lot about this interview, Chris, so far is like for every like question or every doubt that I had in my mind about the relationship, your solutions were very simple. Like the step by step, like two-step solution, three-step solution, like you spoke about the five languages. So, Chris, do you have or you want to give a final advice to all the couples out there? Because this is a special episode for Valentine's Day. So, I want you to give a message to all those lovely couples out there.
Yeah, the message I would give you is this, that, like I said before, two pieces of advice. People change over time. It's been, in 7 years, each and every cell in your body is replaced. So people change, their values change, everything changes. But that doesn't mean the relationship is at risk. So, for example, Linda and me had very similar values for a long time, and now our values are slightly different, but the core character elements don't change. The fact is that she has a good heart and she is a beautiful soul. That doesn't change. So don't lose sight of that, even if your values deviate, right? Because that is fine. People will change, and you've got to accept that they change, and you've got to support them in the change. The second thing I would say is that, and I say this to people, sometimes I'm asked to do, a toast at weddings and stuff like that. And I always say the relationship you have with your significant other, so your husband, wife, whatever, right, is the most important relationship in your life. Okay? Now, as much as you love your parents are your past, and as much as you love your kids, whether you like it or not, they will leave home at some stage, they will get married, and their priorities will change, right? The one person you have that is with you the most, statistically, the most number of years is with your significant other. So once you work that out, and that line, uh, happy wife, happy life, it goes happy husband, happy life is the same thing, right? It's like it is a relationship you need to treasure, you need to nurture. It's not going to just happen. You have to work at it and don't take it for granted because it is the single most important relationship. I hear a lot of people who, openly will say, I hate to say this, but especially mothers with sons will say, oh, my son is the most important thing in front of the husband. Now, what does that do to that husband's need for significance? It's like it's not going to help, right? Your partner has to be the most important person in your life. And if you treat it like that, then you will have a great relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely. I totally agree with you, Chris. And I think this has been one of the most interesting episodes of my life so far. That I've been doing podcasts from last 3 years, but this has been the most interesting one. Trust me. And I'm certainly going to take your advice, Chris. And I think everyone who is watching this should also make notes because Chris has given very very simple and effective ways to enhance your love life. So, this Valentine's Day, let's not just be superficial in celebrations with roses and chocolates and dates and everything, but give true meaning to our love. Thank you so much, Chris, for taking out time from your busy schedule for this podcast. And thank you very, very much once again for coming to my show, Mom Story by Sana.
Thank you, Sahana. It's been great fun talking to you, and all the very best with this podcast.
Thank you so much. So, dear viewers, so that's it for today's episode. And thank you so much for watching this episode. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel, Mom Story by Sana. Stay tuned for more such interesting episodes in future.